Welcome, my name is Hlib Vyshinsky. I'm the Executive Director of the Center for Economic Strategy, and let us start our monthly overview of the Ukrainian economy under the war. And this project is done together with the German economic team, and every month we make a review on what is taking place in the economy during this 1 month in various sectors of economy, and we are always making a short presentation, and every month we select a special topic. I will announce this topic a little bit later. Now a few technical points. As usual, we have a lot of representatives of the international organizations. Therefore, if you want to listen to us in English,
please use translation in Zoom below.
And the questions to speakers you can leave in Q&A or in chat. We will ask these questions to the speakers after we discuss with the participation of our speakers. So the topic that we will be discussing today is actually every month we're taking something special, something that is most actual, something that we have seen last month. It was the topic of the budget spending. So it's the topic how, under the conditions of the full-fledged lasting war, how there should be a balance found between the expenses on security and defense, which is definitely a priority, with the expenditures to the rest of the various other topics. It started with the discussion of some certain particular cases, but we actually would like to, first of all, to bring in some more clarity into this discussion, some more data, and irrespective of a lot of discussion in the social media, we have not seen any good full-fledged discussion on this topic. Who are actually the stakeholders. So we actually decided to organize this topic within the monthly meetings. So our plan for today is as follows. First of all, we would make the presentation, a short presentation of what was happening in the Ukrainian economy over the last month. And somewhere around 17:30, we will actually start the discussion and the topic, how to better use the funds which are available, especially what concerns the Ukrainian communities and local governments. I will later present to you the guests of our today's discussion. These are the people who are deciding on the policy on the local level, as well as some who decide on the governmental level. So now I would like to pass the word for a short introduction to Yuriy Polushkin, who is our GET project manager in Ukraine. And after that, we will go to the overview of the Ukrainian economy over the last months.
Many thanks. Warm welcome from Berlin. My name is Yuriy Polushkin. It's a great pleasure for me as the project manager Ukraine of the German economic team to introduce today's webinar. The German economic team is an advisory project financed by the German Ministry for Economic Affairs and Climate Action and has been active in advising the Ukrainian government and state institutions for more than 15 years. This webinar, together with the Center for Economic Strategy, it provides an important opportunity to discuss the state of the economy, which is a regular part of this monthly event, as well as today's important topic, fiscal policy and regional development. Russia's full-scale war has been causing extraordinary challenges and changes to Ukraine's fiscal strategy and fiscal policy. While the policy focus has shifted more towards defense expenditure, the needs to finance regional rebuilding and reconstruction projects has dramatically increased due to Russia's attacks. The regional economic map has thereby changed such that the central government fiscal policy has to account for these changes. Let me mention 3 changes. First, the reallocation of thousands of businesses and millions of people from Eastern Ukraine to Western Ukraine took place during these horrible 18 months. Secondly, international partner countries determined oblasts and Hrumadas for their support and reconstruction projects. Thirdly, administrations on oblast and Hrumada levels are now facing unprecedented challenges to apply for project funding and to implement projects, bringing their administration capacity to certain limits. In this context, I'm very delighted that the Center for Economic Strategy has put this topic on the agenda and has invited such high-level experts and policymakers to discuss these topics and their experience on these changes and challenges. I look forward to a very interesting discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gary.
Okay, and now I would like to pass the floor to my colleagues who will make the presentation and who will make a review of the Ukrainian tendencies over the last month. First will be Dmytro Gorinov, our senior economist, who will make the overview of what was happening at the battlefield and how this influenced Ukrainian economy, the overall economic tendencies, as well as the tendencies in the sectoral development. So, Dmitry, we do see your presentation. Please say something. Yes, do you hear me? Yes, we hear you really well. So let us start. So let us start from the military review. So we now have a very careful stage of counter-offensive. We are trying to ruin the logistics with missile strikes. We are also discussing the possibility of giving to Ukraine long-range missiles in order to make us possible to work even further in the rear. Unfortunately, the response that we get from the Western partners is not also. We have received a lot of new strikes on Odessa and other ports. At the moment, it's not clear whether this was the reaction, the gesture that everything should be destroyed here, or it was more from the commercial point of view, because we are competitors with Russia and they want to get rid of the competition on the grain market. But as far as we know, this is commercial expectations. They didn't work. Regarding the macro trends, at the moment, we don't have the official data related to the GDP, but the colleagues from the ICU have calculated that GDP increased by 20-21% year to year. That's the first growth since the beginning of the full-scale invasion. But we also understand that this is like the base of comparison. The second quarter was not so good. Everybody was not yet sure. Remember 1 year ago, so within 1 year, it looks not so optimistic. The National Bank improved the 2023 forecast from 2 to almost 3%. Some private players expect even more growth. At the same time, NBU has worsened its expectations for the next year because the earlier expectations were based on an assumption that the active phase of the war will end in the beginning of 2024. Now, the expectations that the war will still last through the mid-2024. Based on the information from the National Bank, who do a lot of research, the business activity expectation index decreased slightly. It's even below the neutral level. That means the number of pessimists actually exceeds the number of optimists. And this is the index that is taking place in 52 various industries. So more than half actually decreased their expectations, worsened their expectations. This is because of electricity tariffs that grew up and fuel taxes that are to increase, as well as because as the general background, the end of the grain deal and of course more security risks, because more missile attacks are still taking place. Damage assessment exceeded $150 billion. With that said, in July, this figure grew by almost 3 billion. This is like the biggest increase in 1 month, but 2 billion is actually the estimation of the Kakhovka's HPP's destruction. The other largest contribution is the cumulative update on housing estimates. There is some 500 million plus, because yes, the housing is the biggest component in these calculations. What concerns the energy, the military are estimating terroristic risks at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power station as lower than before, but one not so positive factor is that the fourth reactor is in hot stop mode now. At the same time, electricity imports increased by 68% in July. There has been an abnormal heat in Ukraine, and some generating capacity is on repairs, so we do have some deficit which had to be compensated with imports that really increased in July, unlike so this was happening. The energy workers, it's now hot, but the energy workers are already thinking a lot about the winter. They are warning the consumers that we should be getting ready for that, because the infrastructure is restoring. It's more or less under normal plans. Nevertheless, nobody knows what is happening. Like the tech has become the official importer, that they started an official distributorship of EcoFlow. So that's what we should know about energy workers. So we hopefully don't have the same problems as we had last winter. Also, related to the fuel situation, the full-scale taxation of fuels did not kick in to the full extent yet. We have forecasted that based on its type may increase by 24%. So far it's on average 7%, as it was known, but more is to come in August. So this increase will come more in August. Regarding metallurgy, the data about the steel production are coming with some delay, so we do see some results of June, when we saw the effect of blowing up the Kakhovka nuclear power station. Some major producers, including ArcelorMittal and Nikopol ferroalloy plant, were left without the water. Now we do know that they have restored water supply. That's why when we know these figures over July, they may be back to the spring figures. There is some expectation. More will come through some ground railway, and this will actually worsen the competition for these routes, for these overland routes. More or less everything's okay. The iron ore is okay. We should use this. Actually, Metinvest was going to buy Dunafer plant in Hungary, but the Hungarian authorities didn't allow that. So Metinvest is actually doing about starting from zero a facility in Italy. The worst news is that the grain deal ended. It worked for 1 year, and we can see that by experts. In 2023, the harvest of grain oilseeds should reach some 69 million tons. So we have to think about some logistics, how to use other channels of supplies in order to export all of that. Also, we can see the continuation of the tendency to have a bigger processing percentage, especially against this bigger logistical problems, and we have certain limitations in terms of supplies of certain agricultural products to the neighboring countries of Europe. So the year is to finish that in August and September. That ban should have finished. However, some countries have voiced that they will continue this ban. This month we have added a new slide. I don't know whether this slide will be regular, but because last months there was an increased construction, we wanted to understand why. Unfortunately, some clear data we don't have regarding the volume of construction. Yeah, I mean, they're there, but they're quite vague. So what is happening, we see it as a separate pieces of the puzzle. Reconstruction money started to flow from budget, the budget and private sources, and even foreign donors. It's most of all, it's foreign donors' money that they used to rebuild damaged housing, helping hospitals, some production capacities. So various types of real estate are being financed with that. The budget started to pay compensation on damaged housing. The Oselia program is still on, that is for mortgage subsidies. And based on some AON group, some 75 housing projects have resumed construction that were on during the full start of the full-scale war, and even almost 200 new projects were started. Rent rates and occupancy are rising in all segments, in housing, office, and commerce, also in trade. Also, the hotel occupancies have improved. That's all from my side. Thank you. Thank you, Dmytro. And let us continue our overview with the situation in the monetary policy and the situation on the foreign currency market. Maria Tamilina, our economist. Maria, the floor is yours. Colleagues, welcome. I hope you can see me and you can hear my presentation. So let's go to the monetary policy of Ukraine. Let us look at the key rates. The National Bank has cut the key policy rate from 24 to 22%. This was thanks to the rapid disinflation and sustained FX market conditions. At the moment, the key rate is 22%. The level of yield for 1 year hryvnia military bonds has decreased to 17.8. At the end of July, average rates on retail deposits continued to rise, and they reached 14% per annum, while the interest rates on 12 months retail deposits decreased to 15%. In July, inflation has been going down to 11.3%, and in monthly terms, this price is decreased by 0.6%. So if we look at the July inflation, the CPI index decreased by 1.9%. Prices for vegetable decreased most, minus 18%, and eggs, minus 7.6%. Transport prices rose the most over the months by 2.7%. Although inflation continues to slow down, the risk of pro-inflationary pressure is still high in wartime conditions due to the destruction of infrastructure, and the pressure on consumer prices can also have more effect because of the rise in electricity prices. Commenting the banking sector of Ukraine, we are looking at the increase of hryvnia deposits of the population that is connected with the increase of the rates. We can see that the FX term deposits continue to decline due to hryvnia strengthening, the spread narrowing between exchange rate, and people don't buy foreign currency like that anymore. The bank's lending survey said that the banks increased demand for hryvnia retail loans and approved more hryvnia corporate loan applications, especially for SMEs. It's the first time since the war began. Also, we have seen that in July, Sense Bank was nationalized to stabilize the Ukrainian financial system and to safeguard deposits and creditors' interests. IMF believes that nationalization of the banks on the basis which is not connected to the financial stability can be a risk to the country and to the system. Also, NBU has liquidated non-systematic Concord Bank, but it was not a systematic bank. The situation with the FX policy, hryvnia has strengthened and international reserves rose to a record high value. In July, we have seen a lot of need for significant sales of foreign currency to support the rate. But the Ukraine's international reserves increased in July, reaching $41.7 billion. That is financing the imports. So we do live because of the good rhythmic incoming from international partners, which are surpassing the NBU's net FX sales and Ukraine's FX debt repayments. The official rate remains fixed at 36.5. However, the cash market rate has been stable. The NBU has prepared the strategy to gradually ease the restrictions for foreign exchange. We have also seen the new forecast from NBU as part of their inflation report. In accordance to it, we will see the economic recovery. Inflation will decline, and they have improved the forecasts of GDP. There will be a better recovery of the internal demand. In the next years, growing of the economy will also improve after the security risks will improve. In the next years, inflation will slow down due to better logistics and production recovery after security risk ease. External assistance will make it possible to finance large budget needs. The NBU will continue reducing its key policy. Also, the Kakhovska hydropower station destruction has deteriorated the effects. In 2024-2025, inflation will slow down due to better logistics and production recovery after security risks ease. As I said, external assistance will make it possible to finance large budget needs and maintain high levels of international assistance in 2023-2025. It is also expected that NBU will continue gradually reducing its key policy rate to keep hryvnia instruments attractive. At the same time, monetary conditions will remain tight for a long time. That's all from my side. I'm also passing the floor to my colleague. Thank you, Maria. And our last presentation within the framework of our review that consists of two parts. This will be the review of what was happening with the Ukrainian budget since the last month, and also some significant presentation for our today's discussion, particularly the structure of expenditures from the state and local budgets. Yuriy Gaidai, our senior economist. Yuriy, please, the floor is yours. Good afternoon. I hope you can hear me well. Definitely, let us start from the overview of the overall budget. Center this July, the revenues were more than 84 billion hryvnia. This was 2.2 increase versus the previous months, and the main drivers remain indirect taxes. First of all, it's the growth of VAT, by 2 billion hryvnia, also internal VAT, but together with excises and duties, they brought together more than 60 billion hryvnia in 1 month. That's the highest monthly figure this year, and that's the three quarters of all tax revenue collected. Cumulatively, the incoming that is dependent on the state tax service, they are outperforming the planned revenues, while the customs have collected 1.6 less than what they planned. What concerns the state budget expenses, in July they stopped this monthly growth. The monthly expenses were 353 billion hryvnia. That's only 1% more than it was in June, but that's plus 50% better than what it used to be last year. Of course, defense expenses in June exceeded 197 billion hryvnia, which is the largest nominal monthly expenditure in Ukrainian history. It's actually in July, not in June. Sorry for the mistake. That's, yeah, the largest nominal monthly expenditure in Ukrainian history. We decreased the spending on governance with debt service expenses. Other spending remains more or less at the same level as previous month. Regarding the foreign financing, Ukraine has received in July another tranche from the European Union, the biggest in volume this month, almost $1.7 billion from the EU, also a grant from the United States, which is put directly into the budget, as well as a loan from Japan, $1.5 billion, and some more $2 billion to be disbursed. And we also disbursed a second tranche. We received this disbursement from IMF. If $32 billion, the debt repayment needs amounted to $32 billion, while the foreign financing amounted to $29 billion. That means the difference between what we need and what we have is some $8 billion, and we expect it will be closed mostly with additional issues of domestic bonds. Now we can go directly to our topic of today's month. We have the analysis here. It will be done on during the first 6 months, where we have the good detailization thanks to the Ministry of Finances. If we compare the dynamics of exactly the deficit of these local budgets, then this year this deficit has grown significantly quicker than the previous year in the beginning of the year, but already starting from May we can see quite a sustainable dynamics of state budget. So it has brought to some small local budgets surplus. So today, within the first 6 months, we have 64.5 billion. So with all the budget incoming to the budget, just to understand the scale of it. Last year, we saw a trend of growing of the deficit during the first 11 months. In December, as it traditionally can happen in Ukraine, there was a significant rise in spending that has changed the figures of the yearly deficit. I have also tried to look at the cross-section of some individual local budgets, because the situation is very much different throughout the country and throughout various regions and territorial communities. Is very much different from one community to the other community. And here, there is a significant influence. It's coming from the military PIT. This incoming to the local budgets amounted to more than 50 billion hryvnia. Again, we are comparing with the overall profit of 64.5 billion. But situation is very much stable. In the first column, you can see the distribution of budgets of all levels based on their balances. And if we take out 61 budgets, mostly from occupied territories where we didn't have any spending, there was some minimum incoming there. We will not take them into account. Then we would have 35 budgets with a significant deficit with some 25%, although we do have some budgets that have 50 or 75% deficit. Also, we have 161 budget with the deficit of less than 10%, but some 1,356 local budgets, they are in profit, and some of them are in significant profit. We have also tried to model the scenario in which the budgets of all levels were not getting the military PAT. That's the second column. So, as you can see, the situation is quite significantly changed. We would have, in essence, the number of deficit budgets is decreasing from 227 to 543. With this 270 budgets, this will be in significant deficit. That is just for understanding that the same approach to cutting all budgets based on certain types of incoming, it may also create problems with financing some local budgets. So it's important to have a common approach. I have also found out top 10 local budgets by surplus. We don't see any surprises here. Kyiv is occupying the first place with the profit of 13.5 billion hryvnia. Even without the military PIT, this could be a quite significant surplus. At the same time, for Kharkiv, Dnipro, and Mykolaiv, they would be coming to deficit if they didn't take into account the military PIT. And related to the concentration of surpluses, top 10 budgets account for almost 39% of total accumulated surplus for 6 months of this year, which is not so big. If we look as the broken down by the budget expenses, we can see very interesting information that, especially in the light of the future discussion, that only 13% of local budgets are capital. That's capital transfers to other budgets, and some insignificant amounts, the procurement of goods for long-term use, repairs, and capital construction, really small share. So on all of this capital spending is mentioned as yellow. The current ones is green. Salaries take a lot of money, subsidies and transfers, salary taxes. Apart from the educational spending, if we look at some expenditures of some local budgets, one of such biggest articles is the spending on subway in Kyiv, which is more than 1 billion. And if we look at the functional distribution in all of these local budgets, then we can see then the lion's share goes to electricity, 122, to education, 122, billion hryvnia governance, economic activities, and on the fourth place, we can see utilities. There is only 20 billion hryvnia. So I believe for a lot, this could be a surprising figure, surprisingly low figure. Then we have social protection, healthcare, religion and sports. And the list is actually the expenses on public security and courts. In the first place, 5.8 billion hryvnia. That's the spending actually for the state service for emergency situations. So that's the overview of some local spending. I think it will act as a good basis for our discussion, and I'm making it available for everyone now to start the discussion. Thank you, Yuriy. Very nice figures. They speak a lot, and the presentation does speak a lot to our public discussions, which we have had over the last few months, where we have a lot of discussions, but in reality, the figures and the analysis as such of what is being discussed, true structural analysis is actually very few, very little. So thank you so much that you have done it in such a quick mode with the monthly review, that we have actually done this presentation and such an analysis. So now I would really like to ask the all members of our discussion to turn on video, and we will be starting the discussion. Today we were trying to select all stakeholders for the discussion. For those, let me put it this way, the problem of the state policy, how in the conditions of the war, it is better to use these limited resources. So we have today the representative of the community, which was occupied, which suffered and had a lot of destruction during the Russian invasion. That's Yuriy Bova, the mayor of Trostianets. Yuriy, thank you so much for joining us. Also, we have the representative of vice versa, the community which is on the other side of the country, the city where we had a lot of business and private individuals and taxpayers relocated. That's Serhiy Kiral.
Також у нас є представниця, як
Also,
правильно
we
назвати,
have
Київську міську раду.
the
Законодавча
representative
місцева
of the
представниця влада Kseniia Semenova є
it's
заступницею голови Київської міської
Kseniia
ради.
Semenova, who is the deputy head of the Kyiv City Council Commission on Digital Transformation and Administrative Services, very famous local activist, and actually the city of Kyiv is the center where we have the biggest number. I think it's more than 10. I think it's 15% of the population of the country on the controlled territories. So Yuriy has shown to us how important is Kyiv in terms of all the overall spending that is taking place in Ukraine. We also have the representative of the central authorities, in this case, the legislative authorities, that's Volodymyr Tsabal. Volodymyr is the MP from Holos. He's the secretary of the Verkhovna Rada Committee on Budget. Welcome, Volodymyr. We also asked the Ministry of Finances to join us, but they have not yet formulated their final policy related to this question. So unfortunately, we don't have anyone from the Ministry of Finances. Although slowly but slowly, some declarations by the minister and his team are being voiced. So let us start from representatives of the local authorities. I wanted to hear your response to what has been discussed today and what was presented today, and those presentations that were given to us by Yuriy. What is your position? What we can do with this? Of course, it's not a full-scale discussion of the state policy, when we have to really argument all the ways, all the options. So we have less than 1 hour for that, and we don't have that many materials which are already prepared. Various options are being discussed. We're talking about full abolishment of income tax for the military during at least the martial law in order to take away this problem. Also, some option of regulating taxes on the local level is being discussed, either through treasury or maybe through some other procedures. So we do have what we call in our economic slang the verbal intervention, when the president has voiced the following: let us think what we are spending money on during the war. This was reflected in the way that the tendency that we have seen in July shown by Yuriy. Also, there are some other ways. So let us start from Kseniia, because all this discussion started with the beautiful picture from the social media in the Kyiv city administration, where the administration reported about changing stones, pavement stones on Khrushchevskaya Street, and then we will go to the representatives of the local authorities, Trostianets and Lviv. So, Kseniia, how do you think? Of course, you don't represent the whole authorities of the city of Kyiv, but nevertheless, you are the person who is actively thinking related to local governments and has a lot of experience at the level of Kyiv. How to better walk out from this situation? Could you be brief, please? Good afternoon to everyone. Many thanks for this discussion. It is truly necessary and it's very professional, because we have a lot of public manipulations, and the local budget, the usage of the local budget for the defense has been a political instrument, unfortunately, and it would be really nice in such a discussion to come to a conclusion whether the city should spend the money on defense or this should be the issue for the state. So the topic which you're raising about the income tax from the military salaries, also not to show to local budgets. In Kyiv, the incoming from the military 6.1 billion. We have also included the city program of 5 billion. So we have put inside the defense 5 billion, and we received 6 billion from the salaries of the military. You have all heard the scandals, which shows how the resolution of the cabinet of ministers doesn't work. So what the budget costs add to their decrease, they add some military aspects that really helps them to spend money not in the good place. We're talking about the changing of pavement stones around shelters. That's absurd. So this is only formally corresponding to this resolution, but the treasurer believes it's enough, and they say okay to such kind of works. They are being financed. They were financed last year, and they continue to do it now. The second story is change the pavement stones, new ways, new highways, and that's a political question. I've also heard this from the political opponents from Udar. They said that the elections into self-governance, they will be after the war. People will not be interested so much in shelters, and the issue of security will not be so much interesting. But people will see what a beautiful park has emerged. So this will be the request after the war. This is about the politicization of the local budgets. Here we should keep in mind that the local governments, these MPs, these are the political elected persons who would always think about the electoral result. So this idea of electoral result, it's in the head of every MP. When we put the money to this protection of the capital program, Now the financial persons, the Department of Economics, they are trying to understand how to implement this program, because this is the function which is not typical for the city. There are some ideas about purchasing of drones. We should buy parts somehow, then to put them together. It's not clear who should be getting this money, to which community, communal institutions. So how to implement it, it's not very clear. Kseniia, I apologize. I would like to just add, we made a research regarding the communal companies, utility companies. I want to create the municipal military company with the analogy of the private military companies. Yeah, this is actually one more thing which I wanted to mention. If the people will discuss that the self-governance should finance the army, in Kyiv we already have the case where the military of the 112th Territorial Defense are protecting the certain objects. I don't know if they have any military assignment, but they're physically there, they're protecting them. We have actually specified the last names, whether this instrument, when the state really has a strong position, but in the future, even not during not the martial law, but later, when the change in the authorities will be taking place, whether it will be a normal possibility for the local government to create. Factually, this is private troops. It was actually a lot of critique about the municipal guard, but the municipal guard doesn't have the ammunition. They can't use it. This is like really an instrument of the civil control that doesn't have really power. So the monopoly for power, it should be kept within the state. And my personal opinion, that's a correct approach. Now, what I think personally, what would be good for the city to spend during the war, that's naturally not what an ordinary electorate would listen to, but the self-governance, it's not should not be doing defense issues, buying drones, but hospitals where we have the military medical commissions, they should be within the authority of the local governments. Equipment for the equipment where the injured soldiers are getting cured, that should be self-governance body. Progress to reintegrate them, medical processes. Yes, this is all can be done by the local governments. Part of the military have families, children, kids go to kindergartens. In Kyiv, in September, some 120 schools don't have shelters. It's the second year of the full-fledged, full-scale invasion, but no new shelter has been produced. So after the martial law, people will not be interested in shelters, but nobody knows when the martial law is lifted. The infrastructure, what is being very much surprise to the experts, the infrastructure in Kyiv after martial law has started to move back to the 1970s, where they don't take into account the needs of people with disabilities, the people who are like cyclists, so they do stimulate people speeding up. And after a big pressure, we get some underground crossings. So Kyiv is not really good equipped to people with wheelchairs, and we don't see that many people with disabilities. It's not because they are not there. We have to understand there are quite a lot of them. And I'm not talking only about civilians. It's in the first place is the military. And my forecast is that the next scandal is going to be with some scandal related to some military on a wheelchair who will simply not be able to cross the street in some place. So my opinion is that the social sphere should be the authority of the local governance with the accessibility of the city, in general, the military-friendly, veteran-friendly, IDP-friendly city. This is something that we should concentrate on instead of this declarative, nice projects, which until the invasion brought their result, but during the invasion, they don't solve any problem. Thank you. Thank you, Kseniia. I would also like to inform you that the knives are flying as the Kinjal missiles are flying to Vinnytsia, to some other regions that doesn't concern Kyiv, but those of you who want to go to the shelter, we will understand. I can see that Yuriy is signing documents, so in Trostianets community, it's more or less safe. Yuriy, welcome. We have seen each other on the project New Leaders. Your community is one of the examples where to spend is quite a lot because you have a lot of distraction. How does the budget of your community look like, and what are the risks from your side in case there will be some general decision taken that could also not take care of most important thing when everybody was be looking at some big figures for the big cities, but what will be happening to some smaller communities who actually suffered a lot from this invasion. Good afternoon, dear all present. The topic is quite interesting, and various positions coming from experts will still have everybody with some opinions. In the first place, for our country, most important is, and it's of course the victory in the war. And we should put it in the discussion what the state should do, what the local governments should do, and the citizens for this victory. From the other hand, we should also understand that in Ukraine the life continues, and the idea is to put back life in communities which were affected. And we have some communities which were not affected. They were simply lucky that they didn't have any shelling, no occupation. Also, we had communities who suffered from shelling and communities that were actually occupied. That's a different level of occupation, looting, and the psychological traumas. And after these communities, as I said, they were liberated. Nevertheless, it's the Chernihiv, Kyiv, Sumy, and Kharkiv regions, and people have received their freedom, which they wanted so long. They took their things and they got out of these territories, especially the ones who have kids. So the discussion is how to keep these people, how to bring them back to these territories, and how to reinstate and restore the economic and social life on these territories. Because if everybody now leaves for Poland, for Germany, or for the Netherlands, and for the Western Ukraine, because yes, a lot of international funds are supporting the relocated business, which means they support, promote them of leaving the territory. But we may lose in such a way a big number of territories. We will have the minimum number of active companies, minimum taxes, and that means the minimum possible level of social, educational, cultural, and other services, which to the same extent is going to bring the influence, a lot of influence on the way where the people should be returning. I will talk in a very plain language so that everybody understands. For instance, if I'm talking to an IDP in Latvia, who is in Latvia from the city of Kyiv, she used to be a coach of some swimming. She got out with her kid. She was not in occupation. She said, "No, I will not come back because I have a child." And in Latvia, I found a number of groups, a number of sports sections, and in Kyiv she only had one sports activity for her child. So it was not the salary, it was not the level of apartment, because in Kyiv she also has an apartment, but the way that her child was provided with the possibility to develop in this or that particular settlement, that stipulates whether she would return or not return. Very active person, full of life, ready to develop our sports, our children. So if now let's put it this way, if we send all the funds, of course, we did do a lot of analytics. We can today, even without anything, without any financing of any works, and hope for some charitable funds who will give us the money for some instruments, for sports inventory, for computers. But in this particular case, I think that we should make the following. If we, just put this money only to the armed forces of Ukraine. So the question is, number one, what happened to these cities, to these settlements? Shall we return people here? What would the government invest into the cities 1 or 2 years down the road when the life is already lost? Secondly, when we make the analysis of our budget, I didn't like the comparison with drones, because this was actually a lot in the media, unfortunately, and even some high officials started at the official level started to compare communities using drones. You can't compare Trostianets community with Ivano-Frankivsk or anything in Poltava region. It's not about the issue about of course there is no need to dig pits in Poltava or in Ivano-Frankivsk. Is there an immediate line of defense that goes on your territory? No. Are there any other things which are available on other territories? So definitely there is no clear answer what distribution of the city budget should be done in this or that city. This should not be the case. And that self-governance, they should decide. The local government should decide. And we welcome today the capacity, our own capacity, not to use some templates, but rather saying what is done. And if there is any free funds, also to direct them to including drones if we don't have any other costs. But I gave you an example about this settlement. I have also some line of defense. I also have military pits we are spending a lot of money on from the local budget. Apart from that, also for the restoration of the damaged housing, that it means schools, etc., etc. Not all the shelters are built yet, and there are some schools which are 25 kilometers from the front line, and definitely there's no possibility to have the educational process without the shelters. So apart from drones, there is still, we can do a lot. So when they show somebody who gave money for drones and showing that others didn't do that and they're bad, this you can't do. That should be the local government. That's why we appreciate local governments. You have to decide yourself what to do on your own territory. But once again, keeping in mind the victory and what we can contribute to a victory on a specific territory, or to give money to a specific army subdivision, or what we should spend on the return of the person to the territory. If there is no hospital, if there is no public transport, if there is no utilities, people will not return. You understand, in a looted city by Russians even looted the instrument from the utilities companies. I'm not even talking about the damaged equipment, the water purification structures, and more and more and more. Of course, this should be a part of the state policy. Of course, we should rebuild these cities, and we can't talk about from taking any money from these cities and towns which are being renovated. There could be a situation when we are begging the charity, the donors give us some money for some public transport, but then comes the military commissariat and he says, I should take some of the trucks from you and bring it to the military. So what the charity gives us for the renovation of the city, sometimes it physically the military come and they take out. I only have one excavator in the city, which should repair all the water pipelines or sewage or do some other work in the city and help the armed forces of Ukraine dig pits, etc., etc. So if I give all the rest of the money for the defense, I don't mind that, but we have to clearly understand the responsibility that there will be no renovated objects in the cities, other services will not be given, and there will be a lot of deterioration. And that should be voiced at all levels, because people will get the deterioration of the utilities, etc., etc. Don't talk about the high-quality medicine, don't talk about the high-quality schools, which should be there. Like in our city, we give for the defense this more than 10 million hryvnia. From the military, we received 7.8 million, but we gave 10.8, so some plus 3 million. It's not only that the military payments we gave even more by 3 million. So if they want to take away the income tax of the military, then what should be financed? So that's why it's not working. And most important question is, now, this problem is in a very simple reason. A lot of military units are registered not on the border territory, they're registered at the western Ukraine, the Yavrivsky polygon. So we understand that they have a lot of money there. It was actually even from last year. I was in some communities, I will not name them. I was asking the financial people and they said, we really don't know where to spend the money because they have the military units there. Let us make the simple thing. Why shouldn't we send the income tax from the military to the community where he's actually staying? Of course, the kindergartens stay and the children of this military go to kindergarten. And once he goes back home after he is injured or he is demobilized, he goes to his city, he goes to his psychologist, he wants his water pipeline renovated. He doesn't want to wait for years until it's possible. And why we're having this discussion in Ukraine about this income tax based on your place of registration or registration of your business. So the registration of the military unit, that's a priori not correct, because the military units which are created now, they are registered now away from the front line, and after it's formed, it's moving to the border. And you know what is happening? They say, we don't have this, we don't have that, we don't have that, please provide us. While their income tax went to something else. So if we have the income tax, the military income tax, who was drafted, and it will go to his military unit. So the more people will be drafted from that settlement, the more money should come there. So the community should make their decision, because every mayor receives calls from the military or from the wives. My son needs the helmet, the bulletproof, he needs the drone, because we understand that people go and bring this assistance to the Ministry of Defense. Local governments go to units where they have their boys from their city, because it's their electoral audience, and that mayor should take care of him and his family. So when the military income tax will be going back exactly to the place of registration of that person, that would make it a really equal situation. So this situation of the state, it should be as quickly as possibly corrected. I'm absolutely against of taking away the military income tax from the communities. We can do this even from railways, because railway is not doing this. We can't take out months from the city budgets. This will not be correct. But the idea that this military income tax should be paid according to the place of registration, that is very much an issue that will actually solve a lot of things in our country. And then the city mayor, the MPs will bring this issue to the discussion in their sessions, let them decide themselves what they're actually doing. They're buying special lights to take down shahids. If we really stop these shahids at the border, we should put the anti-air defense system throughout all the border and add them with whatever necessary equipment is and try to take them down. So we should not give away anything until we provide the adequate defense on our territory. So this discussion will keep on during a lot of time until the state makes a very clear decision. I believe that once again, that this decision, it will be to plan all the military income tax, and after the military income tax, it will come from the military commissariats, from the security service, from police, who are registered in the oblast departments, but they are placed on a certain territory. This will be a long discussion. We will simply open up the Pandora box. But distribution based on the place of registration, somebody is drafted, his income tax is coming to his community, even if the person has died. This community helps this family, really supports this family. So the local programs to help the military should be based on this money. And these issues are very important. And we are also very much interested that the business would love leave from these territories. If we take all the people out of Ukraine, who will be actually working? So the more money from the military tax will be engaged here. We're giving 40% to the state budget. Okay, not 40, 36, okay, 64 remains at the local level. So every grivna paid to a salary, to a librarian, to the House of Culture, school, hospital, utilities company, 34% is coming back to the state, and the state can make a good use of it as they want it at their discretion. So my personal position is not with drones. Yes, your logic is very much understood. Thank you so much for a very clear, systematic position. And this proposal does have a sense. You have really based it really well. Let us allow me, if this can be technically done. Yes, this is technically possible. Every taxpayer can be fixed. Everybody knows where they are from, the place of registration, the physical registration, and the family stays behind. And we understand that the majority of salaries are sent to their families. The salaries are sent to their families who are buying actually equipment. But this could be a simple case when the wife comes to us and says that his military income tax came to our community, buy him the helmet, buy him the bulletproof vests. This will be a more justified. Okay, let us move to the Western Ukraine. Let us first give the word to all panelists in the first circle. Serhiy, Lviv is a big city. This is not the city of one military unit. There are a lot of people who came to you, a lot of relocated business. This city, since the beginning, has really shown its civil position. We have your big projects on
on
rehabilitation, on prosthesis, but from the point of view of that part of the country that has directly suffered less from the Russian invasion and has not through its investment attractiveness of the peaceful times have their own income. What would you suggest? What decision would be balanced and fair from your point of view? You are the former MP, so from the national position, you have the experience about that. Good afternoon. Thank you very much. You can hear me well. Thank you for the participation in such a very interesting panel. Yes, the topic is very much politicized. A lot has been said by the colleagues from Kyiv, from Trostianets. I absolutely agree with the majority of, if not with all the topics and ideas voiced by them. But I would like to make the following conclusion. We need some order, like in many other spheres of our life, of our society. Even before the war, we are lacking some coordination. Very much surprising that the colleagues from the Ministry of Finances are not participating in this panel, because the colleague, the mayor of Trostianets, talked about it. There should be a clear state policy, very much certainty. We, as representatives of local governments, through our bodies, we are ready, of course, to participate and bring proposals and form a policy, and to make sure it's effective and no secret directed at providing our joint victory, because that really bothers us and that really concerns us. The rest should follow. So this inclusivity, this being engaged by the representatives of local governments into formation of such a policy, could be for the central authorities a very much a priority step. Once again, I emphasize that it's very much surprising that the Ministry of Finance's representatives are not present, because this is the good place where they should hear us back. We have very good proposals announced here. Apart from additional taxes, I would also paying attention to the presentation that we were included in the top 10 cities with the so-called surplus, 1.2 billion. I didn't understand whether that takes into account the subsidies or not, because I don't know, for Lviv, it was defined as 1.2 or 1.3 billion. Does that take into account? We have to keep that in mind, keep that in mind, because we have that instrument which is called the subsidy of leveling, that takes quite some money into the overall fund that the city earns from the taxpayers. So this is the discussion that lasted for a number of years. Colleagues also may know the public position of the city mayor. Also clearly said that this approach is fair or not. Maybe we should also look at some other mechanisms of supporting the communities which are in deficit. But we do have such a mechanism. Apart from that, if we say about the military tax from the income of the military, I also paid attention to the statistics. It's less than 1 billion hryvnia this year. The city, the MPs of local governance, we have allocated 500 million hryvnia fund for the support of the defense. This is the funds that we already started to transfer in the form of subventions to those military units which are located in the city of Lviv and who are actually contributing a lot into the city budget in terms of their military income tax. And until the end of the year, we expect that this figure will grow by more than 1 billion. So we would like to draw your attention, like in other cities, it's very much fair. Whatever we are collecting from the military, we're trying to give back to the military. That concerns not only subventions. We have introduced a mechanism. I heard a colleague from Kyiv where this discussion is taking place. We have already implemented this mechanism. It's already been tested. We are ready to share the experience. We have defined the utility companies who have received the authority to act as the one ordering the procurement, what is necessary for the military units. You have to keep in mind that I have said several times that we have met with the military. This is not always an option. Taking into account this internal bureaucracy, they not always can take a good use of it. Not always they can buy what is actually necessary for the boys, for the defenders who are at the front line. Therefore, very often we are hearing such proposals: you buy and you transfer, because you will do it quicker, faster, and the changes to the legislation in the public procurement allows to implement the quicker way of procurement and use the act of transfer to the military units, and they can put it on their balance. So we are actively using this. There has been a number of procurement already affected, and we hope that in the near future to buy hundreds of millions of hryvnia for very specific military units for their needs. It's important to pay attention from our own experience. I can see the lack of coordination between these military units, the city, the community that is ready to help them. With the general staff, it would really make sense with the Ministry of Defense, maybe with the general staff, to coordinate to create some coordination group that could be added to this partnership between the military and communities in a way to coordinate and to understand what exactly is being procured. Maybe it will be influencing on how the needs are assessed based on our agreements with partners, or how the money is spent from the state budget in order there is no duplication. We would avoid the cases of the ineffective usage of taxpayers' money. That's what concerns the support by the city defense support. That's an absolute priority. We're not talking only about the procurement, but we are trying to put inside the basis for some future industries, and we understand after our victory what Russia that will not disappear, and it will continue to be a certain trigger for a future threat. In the future, we are trying to prepare ourselves to life like in Israel, life in a country that will potentially be under threat, the country that would need to work out our own production of ammunition, where it's important to do innovations, research, and not to be dependent from other countries. That's why we are forming a separate technological cluster. A lot of effort is paid to creation of industrial parks, on the territory of which there will be also defining priorities and allocating support from the city budget in the development of infrastructure, bringing communications for the companies of the military industry. That concerns not only those companies that are working, can be relocated from the state, and that are already being relocated to Lviv, but also including some private projects about whom we spoke recently with the Ministry of Commission. Of course, I will not let you know the details of that discussion, but nevertheless, what concerns the technological cluster, these are the companies, the entrepreneurs who were relocated, who found themselves in Lviv, and who continue to produce various means, including drones for the needs of the front. So we have supported with a overall budget program, some investment vouchers up to 300,000 hryvnia that the entrepreneur can get for the repayment of their costs, maybe to compensate the rent. This is just the beginning of our work, and I really hope that it will be quite successful. We also have the support from the extra budget costs, the costs of donors. And something that Kseniia has already mentioned, it's the question about of inclusivity. More than 30,000 dwellers of Lviv are serving in various troops in the front. We understand and we see from the experience of other countries who went through the war what kind of percentage will come back with various problems, limb amputations. So one of the key projects is the building up of the full ecosystem, which we have called Unbroken, that consists not only of some concrete objects and the centers of giving medical assistance, surgery, prosthesis, production of prosthesis in Ukraine. Unfortunately, in Ukraine, we don't have a good company for the production of prosthesis, and we are dependent on the only monopolist in the world, the German company that provides parts for prosthesis. So we should have our own production. But also with the psychological rehabilitation, we should not forget that millions will require this type of rehabilitation. Mental health, also production of social housing for the wounded, the ones who would be going through rehabilitation, quite a lengthy process that they will request, and as the social infrastructure. So this is the project that can become a real pilot, a real example for the later scaling up to other regions of Ukraine. We don't have the ambition to be the only one, the only key center. More, we want to be the center of excellence, the center that will have the concentration of best practices, best experience from all over the world, with the best services given. But such centers should appear in each region, in each oblast center, because the closer you'll have the possibility to have your rehabilitation, the better is for you, because in time you would need the visits of doctors, the consultations, etc., etc. Serhiy, this is very much clear. I also want to hear Volodymyr. I apologize. Volodymyr Tsabal, the MP from the secretary of the committee of the Verkhovna Rada on budget, but we don't hear you. Yeah, now we can hear you. Volodymyr, it's evident that you are discussing in the committee this problem. You see how this problem has so many sides, even from what we have heard that you have discussed it with the Ministry of Finances, with the Treasury. What is your vision of the picture, and how you can set up this balance, at least for the upcoming budget year? I will put it in brief. The question and the problem that has appeared is divided into two directions. First is the problem why it's coming in this public discussion, that the local communities don't spend enough on the defense. It's more connected with the fact that it's not always clear, not always the society understands the directions of the current expenses. I mean, this didn't appear half a year. It actually appeared just very recently, when certain cases have appeared, when they spend money on stadiums, on roads. So not always people understand under which principle the communities are spending money, especially because they are receiving the additional income from the military. So this is the first aspect of the problem. And that's where I would like to agree to what was said, what Serhiy said. There should be a state policy that should regulate It's not even Serhiy said, it's Kseniia as well said. The state policy should regulate on what the communities can spend money and what they cannot. Of course, there is the resolution of 590, which was mentioned today, which is supposed to regulate the sequence of expenses. First of all, it's what related to security. The second one is the overall needs. And the third one is anything else. But unfortunately, this resolution doesn't work in practice because with this example of drones that they are trying to use to associate it with shelters, and they are misusing the funds. So if this policy would work, if it would be really perfect, and this is the job for the Cabinet of Ministers and the Verkhovna Rada, then we would not have such questions. The first part of the question is to improve the policy that regulates during the martial law what the money can be spent on and what they can't. A very vivid example, as far as I'm concerned, which arguments I'm using. If we could live without something before the full-scale invasion, for instance, there was no such a road, it's not a good time to spend money. But if we couldn't live, for instance, near my house, the bridge was damaged or destroyed. Of course, we can't live without that bridge, so we should spend money on that. So it should not be like we can't spend on bridges. We should spend on something that we can't live without. If we could live without any stadium before the full-scale war, then we shouldn't spend money on that. They should be more perfected. The second aspect of this issue, whether the communities spent enough for the defense and protection. And here we don't have a clear answer, because from one hand, we have such communities as Trostianets, where the revenues fell significantly because the number of people who are paying entrepreneurs decreased who pay income, while the expenses on defense and protection, they are forced to increase because they are some 40 kilometers from the front, from the border. But we do have some communities who are located quite far, where the revenues have grown significantly because the military unit is there, because there are a lot of IDPs there, and the community doesn't know what this money is spent on, and they're spending it on the stadium. So there should be a very clear policy. Let me add one more reason why this question is being so much actively discussed, the question of increasing our expenses on defense. Because now, I will not sound popular, but this is the one single reserve. We have the state budget, 1.3 billion, the internal, plus 300, 1.6 trillion is coming to the security and defense. Correspondingly, this is all the money that we can spend from the state budget. Other money, 1.5 trillion, is the money that was given to us by donors, and we can't spend this money on defense because the donors gave it to us for other expenses, for roads, for salaries. They gave it to us so we can spend our own money into the security and defense. So the state budget doesn't have any more reserves. So how the local budgets can help? Because they are also filled with some taxes of Ukrainians. And I have a very simple opinion. There should be a very clear policy, and there should be expenditures. Of course, you can't finance the high-caliber ammunition, but those expenditures, some additional ones that would help decrease the state expenses on security and protection, so that the state would send that money to additional salaries of the military. Such expenditure should be done, but we don't have the state policy on that. So we have to think about it at the level of the budget committee. At the budget committee, we are trying to consider these issues, but this percentage, sorry, not the percentage, this policy should exist. Let me add that we are running out of time regarding the income tax. No simple solution. As what Yuriy said, if really income tax would be paid based on the place of registration, I don't think this question is at all important. It's very important, exactly, that if the person is drafted from a certain community, that the money would return there. And the community would decide where they want to spend that money, even directly to the person who would need any military equipment. But that can't be solved so easily. We have initiated a similar project last year. So all the taxes would be paid based on the place of registration. However, this was not yet done. There are a lot of technical problems, political problems, and I really don't believe in that. There is no simple solution. There could be a separate approach. We should take into account necessary aspects. If there is a small community where we have the military unit where the income tax has grown by 3 times, it's very correct that the money would be returned to the state budget for the military forces of Ukraine. If there are some communities, I heard about Trostianets, where this income tax is 6, while you are spending 7 for the defense, then it would not be logical to take that money from there, if to put it briefly. If there are any questions, I'm ready to answer. Thank you, Volodymyr. I see there was a comment from Yuriy. There was also a suggestion from Kseniia to comment. I don't know if Yuriy, you have some further wish to comment. Just 1 minute only. This will be like the first trial. What concerns the Ministry of Finances, we do have the parallel project where we're working with the Ministry of Finances. And the topic that was asked, that the Ministry of Finances has asked us to finance, is exactly this topic. So whatever you mentioned, this will be actually brought to the ministry in the very much working order. I just wanted to add a few words. They are asking how much the state has given to the Trostianets for the recovery. But the state of Ukraine, they have found out the special items. We are working on transferring the functions. So this will be done together, whether it will be with the communal housing, with the state housing. So it's like an experiment in the framework of which the Trostianets is acting. So state should help those communities who are distracted at the expense of the hromadas, which are not ruined, showing various taxes. I'll bring you some figure. If you're talking about 156 million plus 50 million, this is 200 million. The city budget of Trostianets had losses of 108 USD million. The overall losses from the assessment, and the analytics was counting. If we calculate with the looted housing only in the budget sphere, then it's a much bigger amount that needs. We should explain how we will be rebuilding Ukraine from the money that are coming from the donors, from the World Bank, from the European Union, that are done, given to us, not for the military objectives. Yes, I can read this, but we have 2 parallel processes: to liberate and to rebuild as quickly as possible and to bring people back. One more question. Let us today talk about that starting from the COVID times, the tariffs for water, sewage, heat, they are no longer correspond to their costs. And today, tens of billions of hryvnia. It's the difference of tariffs in the utilities sector, and this difference is paid by the local budgets. We give some 10 million hryvnia every year to the army, to the defense system. So some 10 million is coming from us to the utilities, to their salaries, to their fuel, to their renovations, etc., etc. So it's a very much identical figure because the population doesn't pay. We as the state has undertaken this social function. So the self-governance does that. So once again, somebody has that and somebody doesn't have that problem at all, because we don't have this communal heat power station or the water utilities, especially in some small settlements. So these issues are very, very important. Once again, regarding the figures, as an example, the community which is occupied, which is damaged, we are doing everything possible that the business would not live there. How to stimulate business? We've received 74 million income tax from them. 10.8 we gave to the system of military. So self-governance is very much conscientious. If somebody is really crazy on distributing these funds, this should be brought to the surface, and this should be the idea for the whole country to rethink about it. A lot of my friends from other communities, they are washing cars, they're buying drones, making donations, making everything possible to help the front. Sometimes it's not recorded in the statistics, sometimes it's not announced. Somebody will talk after the war not to disclose certain information. So believe us, all of this self-governance, all of the local governments, we are fine-tuned, first of all, to win. And wherever we have some disbalances, they should be corrected through the budget leveraging. I'm wondering what Yuriy will do after the end of the war. They'll have a lot of money taken away from their budget. So after the war, that may be possible that they will live for some time without taxes at all. The costs that we had, some state costs that we wanted to spend on pools, swimming pools, we have distributed to shelters, to protecting military, to shelters. Of course, we have other priorities. So once again, self-governance is very much conscientious. First of all, to help the troops to bring closer the victory as soon as possible. And we do everything possible from that. And regarding the military income tax, with the colleague who was giving the floor, this policy has been announced. I think everybody came to a point, at least 50-50. Still, there should be an income tax based on the place of registration of the person. It solves almost all of the issues. Only some communities would say no. The majority of the people work at their community. So income tax should be left at the place of registration. And this will actually leverage the situation. It will not have this disbalances. Thank you for reminding about the water communal companies. There was the story when President said that you guys, local government, please finance the subsidies for water yourself because you are collecting so many taxes. This is not correct. That means that more and more load is coming on local governments without any stable foundation that will be talked about for quite a long time. There should be a state policy about that, not only the local free will. I have a short comment related about the income tax from the salaries of the military. The colleague from Trostianets said it would be nice that this income tax would be sent to community, so the community would be able to buy this ammunition to help this military who is serving in the army, or to direct it to the defense of this region. I think in this response, that's the reason why we shouldn't do it. We have to remember that the defense of the country should be comprehensive, that the line defense will be good from the north, but underfinanced with the military units which are located at the east or in the south. That doesn't mean that we will win the war in such a way. I think the full picture of the defense of the country, this should be exclusively with the general staff. So this is the body which I would really ask to trust. If the general staff believes that now it's a priority to finance the military units in the east, maybe they know something that we shouldn't know. And otherwise, if we take this money from the defense, we are actually deteriorating of the defense for the whole Ukraine. This is my response. Thank you. I agree with you. Volodymyr, your final comment, and we will be finalizing regarding the income tax, as Yuriy mentioned. This is exactly what I meant. Actually, I support the idea that if the registration should be there. So what I said about, that's just a complicated issue. We are for 3.5 years, we have 2 legislative drafts in the Verkhovna Rada, but they have not moved because it's technically very difficult. Unfortunately, we don't have the representative of the Ministry of Finances who could explain to us in bigger detail. So it's really difficult to solve it quickly. So if possible, I would actually agree that there should be, I would agree that this should be done on the according to the place of registration. And the last one, we have 3 solutions: to keep it as it is, then the tax goes to the community, but this is not very much good. The second is what is being discussed in the government among MPs, that let us have 50% keep in the community and 50% sent to a special fund, so that it would really go to the armed forces. I think this is a good solution, which I actually support myself. And the third option is probably ideal. This is the decision about which Yuriy said, but this decision is very much complicated, and I'm not sure that it can be solved. But actually, there is the fourth option in reality, and my colleague has applied with the draft law. It's about canceling the income tax of the military. I would support it. The question is, we would find some compensation for such communities that can significantly lose. What is actually income tax? It's the funds from the salary of the person which is calculated from the salary to serve this salary at the level of the government and at the level of the local government. So if we say at the state, okay, his child goes to school, there are some state roads, hospitals where the person is using them, some benefits, some possibility to go to sanatoriums. So at the level of local government, it's the water, utilities, hospital, school. So this is the funds that is from the person that the person is using. We're not talking about the income of the company. We're not talking about the tax on real estate, which is collected by the state for the provision of state functions. The excise taxes, the customs, we're not talking about that. We want today to free the military from this income tax. Possibly, if such decision is taken, the society will not understand, because not everybody understands the nature of this income tax. What is this money is spent for? 70% of the money of the local government is actually the money for the local budget. If we free the hospitals, some other category, we will simply ruin the budgets of local government. We have, for instance, the military. His wife doesn't work, so the military is serving in the army, but his family is using this money, going to school, going to kindergarten. If we free the military from this income tax, at which costs should his family be supported? And the last, Kseniia, okay, you say we don't go into the system of financing the army from the state level. We're talking about this balance in one cities, in one type of cities where there is a big surplus, in the others the big minus. So if we have the military who are drafted all over Ukraine and very much convinced that we don't have people sometimes to work at communal companies and some institutions because everybody goes to the front, and if we do it on the place of registration, we will balance this. The money will not go to Yavarev. Some small settlement will be put in question, and those military who are drafted will pay funds to Trostianets, to Kyiv, to Zhytomyr, in Zvyagilov, in other settlement, and the local government should make use of that funds. And this will not be such a disbalance where the society has shown to us. They show that, okay, there is a disbalance in one place, and now we should take away money from everybody. No, let's not do that. Let's honestly allocate the taxes. You are absolutely talking in a very argumented manner, but let us also respect people who we promised that it will end at 6:30. We will fulfill our role. Yuriy is also working on that project. We will work on this idea together with the Minister of Finances. We can find out if something has changed from the technical point of view, because digitalization has taken a lot of effect, and this decision looks very much as most fair and the most correct ones, what you are suggesting. So, okay, we should move further. We will process what you have said. Our discussion is online. It is also on Facebook. We will be thinking in more detail and bringing your position into the social media, and we will discuss this. Many thanks to everybody for joining us for the first time. Wish you a very safe evening. Yuriy, Kseniia, Volodymyr, and our team, and Serhiy as well. Goodbye.